Question for you. How many ferments do you think you've done in your life?
I'm unprepared for this question, Dylan.
I know.
I can't do this math right now.
Welcome to Craft Chocolate TV.
Welcome to Hawaii.
Yeah, welcome to the Big
We're
Island
here.
of Hawaii.
Big Island, Hilo side.
So this is Colin Hart. Colin Hart, what did you study at the University of Hawaii?
So I was with Max Breen. I was studying under Dr. Alyssa Cho, fermentation and drying practices for cacao in Hawaii, and seeing how it impacted flavor and a lot of other parameters that we don't need to get into right now. But ultimately, had a lot of different fermentation and drying treatments around the island, and working with Dandelion Chocolate and Guittard, doing a lot of organoleptic assessments to see how all those different treatments impacted the flavor and different flavor characteristics of the chocolate that was made from those beans. So,
And we continue to learn a lot from that.
yeah, I know. I really wish I could kind of, knowing what I know now, go back and redo that research, and which I think we'll probably do.
Well, it seems like you're doing it anyway.
Simplify
I just
it
watched
and
you
redo it,
crack open like 6 different pods to set up micro ferments.
Yep, we just did micro ferment. So yeah, on this farm, we're definitely trying to be a commercial farm, really focusing on productivity and whatnot, but we're also really actively, in association with Kamana Nui Estate, getting a lot of information and really good varieties from them, growing them on our farm and seeing how
God,
they
I feel like there's so many topics right now to jump into.
I know, we don't want to talk about that. We're fermentation, not terroir study. Yeah, but yeah, we're collecting a lot of data on fermentation and other things right now, and it really starts with doing these micro ferments of different varieties and seeing how that.
So a question for you. How many ferments do you think you've done in your life?
I'm unprepared for this question, Dylan. I can't do this math right now. I don't know. I've been like,
Because I met you 12 years ago,
I think we
and
met.
you were already regularly fermenting,
Yeah,
and you haven't stopped for almost every
haven't
season.
stopped, Dylan.
No, you're in deep now. You're not getting out.
Yeah, I'm in deep.
You're not going anywhere.
Yeah, it's been honestly pretty consistent for the past 12 years or so, I'd say. And I'm really happy that I can't look back. I'm happy we don't have samples of those early ferments around anymore.
I remember them.
No, you don't.
You've done hundreds of ferments.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
You'd
many
think
hundreds of
I'd be
ferments.
better at it by now. I guess that's
You might think you'd
I'm
have more
still-
answers for it, but there's still a lot of mystery around this.
all of the cacao that comes from Honolulu orchards is perfect.
It's absolutely amazing,
Perfect cacao,
regardless of season.
regardless of season, regardless of anything. It's just
Actually, that's one of the talking points I have is season.
yeah. Okay.
So, how does the season affect the fermentation based on whatever theory you have here? Because we don't really have answers yet on
Yeah.
why certain seasons are better than others. I'm
Yeah.
going to guess that there's certain wild yeast and bacteria that thrive in warmer climates for us.
Yeah, the environmental factors of any given season is going to impact the post-harvest processing. It's also going to impact the development of the cacao on the trees as well. Throughout the season, we're actively recording Brix percentage, the sugar concentration of the pulp, and that really does fluctuate throughout the year. And
Yeah,
so,
and maybe it's good to share a little bit about your climate here, because
Yeah.
you have a much different Brix levels, which is representing the amount of sugar that's in the
Yeah,
pulp,
yeah.
than say somewhere that's hotter,
totally.
because you receive so much more rain. So what are we looking at?
I would say we're getting like 15, 16% Brix, whereas, somewhere like North Shore at Kamana Nui, I feel like Max has been saying you guys have been getting like 18, 19%. Yeah. And I know that's pretty common over in Lahaina at Dan's farm too. So yeah, we have the Brix percentage is a lot lower at our site. We have a lot more rainfall. We get an average of 150 inches a year up here. We're a little higher elevation. I think that kind of influences the fatty acid. At this site where we're sitting right now, we're about 700 feet above sea level. So pretty ideal for cacao, below 1,000 feet.
So we have 3 really unique farms within the state of Hawaii. One in Lahaina, hot, dry.
Yeah, it's like one of the driest places in the state.
Yeah, it's kind of a desert.
Yeah.
And then we've got Kamana Nui on the north shore of Oahu, which is
Kind of like
near
middle,
Wailua.
yeah.
Middle. And then we have here in Honolulu Estate in Pauka'a on the island of Hawaii. And this is really wet. Like you were saying, 150 plus inches of rain a year.
Yeah.
And we've got all the same genetics planted.
Yep.
So can you tell me a little bit about this
This project.
that you, Max, and Dan are working on,
Yeah.
where we're going to potentially prove if terroir has any impact on the flavor.
What the environmental effects are.
We've been hypothesizing. We've got our theories.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think we all do. Just depending on like some of the things we were talking about. We're already noticing differences in like pod size and the amount of juice and the size of the seeds and the bricks percentage of the pulp and whatnot. There's a lot of differences that we can see already. But something that hasn't really been done is like, okay, how does when you kind of reduce the amount of variables in this process, what really is the impact of the environment on the flavor characteristics of these varieties grown in these
Something we've been talking about for so long.
I know,
And you guys are going to prove it.
The project just started. So Max is really spearheading this project. Max Breen over on Oahu,
Who
managing.
also has his master's in cacao.
Yeah, we were part of the same.
Rootstock?
Yeah, we were part of the same cohort in grad school. So we were both under Dr. Alyssa Cho. He was doing more like propagation management, and I was doing post-harvest processing for my research. So Max is really spearheading this project. He secured all the funding for it. He got a grant to do this and is leading the project. And we just got started this month. I just shipped over the first round of pods to him. And so what we're going to be doing is every month or, a few times every season, working with 3 different varieties right now, PHL 12, 14, and UH4. These are grown here on this site on Big Island, over on North Shore at Kamananui Estate, in Lahaina at Maui Ku'ia, and also on Kauai. And so we're working with 4 different sites, and that all represent different environmental conditions throughout the state. And every month, or a few, maybe like a few harvests that represent each harvest season, we're going to be sending pods, or Max is going to be coming over, harvesting pods from those varieties, bringing it back to Kamananui Estate on Oahu, fermenting them all together in the micro fermentation sacks that we use. And so that's going to eliminate the variable of fermentation on different islands, right? So even if we were doing this where like I was fermenting all those varieties, Max was doing it, Dan was doing it on these different islands, a big variable is the fermentation, right? We're doing all of these beans from these different varieties are fermenting in different ways on these different sites. And so if we got major flavor differences or no significant differences, that would be a big confounding factor. And so being able to ferment all of them in the same area on the same island, drying them the same way, it's really going to not eliminate all of the variables, but it's really going to reduce these variables and really kind of showcase the effect of just the environment on these different varieties of cacao. And then I know, me too. I'm like so excited about this project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, more to come on that one.
Yeah.
But we discussed this in the last episode we did on how to build a fermentation box.
Yep.
But can you tell us quickly about the 3 box sizes we have behind us and why that's important?
Yeah, so we have in the fermentation shed, we have 3 different size boxes, boxes that hold 150 kilos of wet seed, boxes that hold 300 kilos, and boxes that hold 450 kilos. And that's really to basically accommodate for the fluctuation in yields throughout the harvest season. And so right now we filled 2 150 kilo fermentation boxes, and we'll consolidate that into a 300 kilo box probably after the first turn.
And your reason for that being?
Like fermenting in Hawaii is it's different than fermenting in other places. I don't have a lot of experience with fermenting in other countries myself, but Dan O'Doherty, Max Breen, they're both, Dan's been saying this for years since I've known him, like for whatever reason, ferments are just a lot slower in Hawaii than they are in, regions throughout Latin America. You see a lot of 9-day ferments in Hawaii. You see ferments that are not very accelerated in the beginning, not a lot of vigorous yeast activity. So, it's something that me and Dan and Max, we've been speculating for years about why this is. Like, why are fermentations so much more difficult in Hawaii than in other regions? And whether that's because we have less vigorous yeast colonies, we don't really know right now. But for whatever reason, it just seems like we have these very delayed ferments. And we deal with a lot of problems here in Hawaii that growers and other producing regions around the world don't really seem to deal with. So
maybe a good segue into inoculation.
Yeah, there's been a lot of efforts in other countries using commercial inoculants, not a lot of which seem to be very successful in terms of flavor and whatnot.
Can you tell us what an inoculant is?
An inoculant is basically you are culturing microbes and you are adding it to your fermentation to basically kickstart it or accelerate it from the beginning. And some growers in Hawaii are using things like wine yeast or champagne yeast and then adding it to their cacao fermentations to basically boost the levels of yeast activity early on to produce more
consume the
ethanol,
sugars.
to kind of get that microbial succession into action a little bit quicker. But you can usually tell, I feel like, when you're using inoculants. Like, I think something we're really trying to do is use inoculants for fermentations that are derived from cacao cultures, right? So growing them out in cacao juice, taking samples of cultures from successful fermentations and then proliferating those microbes, in cacao juice and then adding it to the next fermentation. It's something that we're playing around with a lot, with the goal of making ferments more predictable and consistent from like harvest to harvest. And it's not something that we really have a handle on right now. It's something we've been experimenting a lot with, something that Dan O'Doherty has been experimenting with really for the past decade. And I think has a really good handle on it, but we're still really kind of trying to figure out a good protocol for
a lot
how to
of
do this.
the success that we've seen on international competitions, whether it's in bean submission or chocolate bar submission, is a result of these fermentation practices that we're doing here.
Yeah. It's not to say we don't get good ferments in Hawaii. I mean, we do get these really amazing, consistent ferments. And there are processors like Ben Field on Oahu who is getting really back-to-back consistent fermentations in his area.
Yeah, he's hitting a scale that no one else has really done yet.
I think he's hitting a scale, and it's really also like his facility is so amazing, and he's fermenting so frequently. He's fermenting, every 3-4 days, definitely once a week. And so there's just like
a buildup of yeast and bacteria.
Yeah, maybe not so much in the boxes, but just kind of in the environment that he's in. He's got a really robust colony of beneficial microbes that are kickstarting his fermentation. Maybe we don't know why.
We're seeing so that's actually our Kahalu'u bar is the main one that I like to showcase from that, and that's his estate bar. But you're right, he's getting good ferments regularly.
Yeah. He's not dealing with some of the problems. Like, I'll text Ben and be like, why, like when I scale up on these 450 kilo boxes, why are my ferments crashing? I've been noticing this issue, particularly when scaling up in fermentations, because, the way, like the knowledge that I grew up learning was like, the more mass, the more volume you have in your fermentation, the more consistent it's going to behave. And so the goal has always been like, okay, get up to the next size boxes. And we built these 450 kilo boxes, which are like kind of the industry standard.
But
it's
you'd
like
expect to be like, all right,
be like,
sweet,
all right,
we're
we got
good.
like,
don't even have to worry about it.
Yeah, we've got 1,000 pounds of wet seed in these fermentation boxes. It's going to be like the best cranking ferment. And I had it like dead in the water last time, just like coming out, like expecting like in the middle of the night, like, oh yeah, I'm going to feel the heat, and it's just like cold. And I was like, wait.
So depressing.
And here in Hawaii, it's like our cacao is really valuable, right? So it's like when you've got a fermentation box that's tanking, like
so many pods
cracked
harvested and cracked and extracted.
But like when you're scaling up like us, and we're like as a farmer, I'm definitely making money off of the sale of the chocolate bar too. It's like you're losing so much product when you're looking at that fermentation box just crashing. It's really it turns into a very serious thing.
Thank God for milk chocolate.
No,
the
best.
It is amazing milk chocolate. Actually, it's the best milk chocolate I think we've ever made is coming from Honolulu Estate.
Yeah.
But the idea behind
Orchards.
the ability behind doing dark and milk chocolate is we're able to really keep what we think is the best for our single origin Hawaiian dark chocolates, which is really special.
Yeah.
It's only going to be the very best that we have. So milk chocolates, even if the beans are fine, we still often will put it towards that if we don't think it's good enough.
The beans for the milk chocolate tend to have more like, base cocoa-y flavors, maybe a little less complexity that we want to showcase in a 70% dark bar. And so, but I mean, I think the through line is that like we want to get to a place where our fermentations are as consistent as possible, because then we can really start playing around with all of these other things, fermenting different varieties, showcasing different flavors that come from different varieties, blending different varieties of cacao. So it's like,
can't wait for that.
Once we get a handle on just like, okay,
as a chocolate maker, that's gonna be really fun.
Totally. And we need to really dial in these practices just so we're not like dealing with this wild inconsistency that we've been getting up until now. So it's
it is getting more consistent.
Yeah.
But it is time, and there's no way around that. As far as seasons go and fermentation, how many, like, we have 2 different parts of our season. There's 2 different peaks. One is much larger.
Yeah.
What months are those, and what does that look like?
I mean, it seems to change island to island, but there are a lot of consistencies in the peaks, for instance. Like we had I mean, this year we've had 4 peaks. We had 2 peaks in the fall and then 2 peaks in the spring. This past harvest, I think, marks the end of our second spring peak. So we had a peak last month, and then this is our second peak. And kind of like if I look at my spreadsheets for yields and whatnot, a little bit more in the fall, some larger harvests for us actually. Getting somewhere around like 500 kilos, 550 kilos of wet seed in one harvest, you know. So I think November, December were 2 big months for us. And then April and May for us as well.
And April and May being the larger of the two?
Yeah. April and May, there were 2 peaks.
As
and
far
then
as our
November,
season's
December.
concerned.
Yeah. And then, you know, in Hawaii, we're growing mixed hybrid varieties for the most part. It's not like we're growing just 3 or 4 clones, you know. Because we have so much variety and so many different selections that we're growing here, we're harvesting pretty much the entire year, maybe 10 or 11 months. Maybe 1 month we're just culling pods because we don't have the production we need to ferment. But, you know, we'll probably
Find a use for that too.
Yeah, and we'll probably get to a point where we're growing like a suite of 5 or 6 clones, and it'll maybe reduce the overall number of harvests that we have, you know, once we kind of dial in all the different unique varieties.
More standardized.
Yeah, it'll be a little more standardized, but
How many
larger.
ferments do you think you do in a year?
Well, we do about 10 to 11 ferments in a year, and that's just been this past year. So,
Okay.
oh yeah,
Can you,
keeps us pretty busy.
this maybe should be its own episode, but
We'll talk about it anyway.
the pod index that we were collecting earlier, can you walk us through some of that? Because Justice was just filming it.
Yep.
And it is one of the things that makes it more unique here in Hawaii. I feel like we're tracking that kind of stuff on the farms better than most places.
Yeah. No, it's something that Tuta from Brazil was just kind of commenting at the last conference. It was like, you guys are spending a lot of time taking all this meticulous data.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think we really take a lot of pride in doing here, just being very focused on that side of this process. But
Well, I feel like that is how Hawaii will continue to have some of the best chocolate in the world, because
yeah.
we're growing the best chocolate in the world because we're paying attention to these nuances. These little details are what's going to separate Hawaii from the rest, because we can't compete with Brazil.
No.
So we have to grow and continually improve on what we're already doing.
Yeah, it's like we have this unique opportunity in Hawaii to really set the stage, you know, doing like really like high quality techniques early on in terms of processing and agronomy and whatnot. And so it's really kind of exciting, but also frustrating to be at this beginning stage because it takes so long to get meaningful data, you know, decades
Yeah, we're in
really
the
to
trees.
get to a point and where it's useful. But yeah, pod index, what we're doing today, pod index, for those who don't know, is the amount of pods it takes to get 1 kilo of dried beans. And so ideally you want to have a lower pod index. You want to harvest less pods to get 1 kilo as opposed to harvest. So it's like, you know, I'd rather harvest 15 or 16 pods to get a kilo than harvest 30 pods to get a kilo. It's more work when you have a higher pod index. It just requires more labor and whatnot. So the goal is to have a lower index.
By collecting that data, if you see that it takes 25 pods to get 1 kilo of beans, you probably don't want to plant that.
It definitely goes in. I mean, we have a lot of different factors that go into the selection of a variety. Productivity, consistent productivity, the architecture of the tree, the taste of the pulp. Over on Hilo side, where we do deal with some disease tolerance or susceptibility really goes into it. Ultimately, the flavor of the chocolate that's made from those beans as well. So it's like, it takes a lot of time to really dial in all of these different factors to create something that's, you know, hits all of those points and is you know, a good selection.
Yeah. Initially, I thought that this was going to be just an episode on fermentation in Hawaii, but it's a really good example of why chocolate and cacao is going to be better than most other places in the world.
Yeah.
And it's attention to this type of detail.
Yeah.
And what we're planting out for the next 10 years.
There's a lot of breeding work that's being done in Hawaii right now that's going to result in very unique flavor profiles that are coming out of Hawaii that you're not going to find anywhere else. And we have the benefit of, you know, being able to do this research here from the beginning. And you know,
this
hopefully
is stuff that we do cover on the tour, right? Maybe we can do a shameless plug on where we're at.
The tour is kind of split up into 2 parts. So, I mean, I give a pretty in-depth perspective agronomically. So talking about the history of the farm, kind of how we select all the varieties that we're growing here, the differences in all the varieties that we grow, and we really experience that through the flavor of the pulp. So we do a pretty in-depth pulp tasting of different cacao varieties. And then we come up to the fermentation area, which we're in right now. We really go deep into fermentation practices, how fermentation develops all of the main flavor precursors that you're experiencing in a good chocolate bar, right? It's all starting in the fermentation, or really starting with the farming side, but accentuated in the fermentation.
I agree. It's a combination of everything we're discussing now, and all I do as a chocolate maker is my best to bring out the best in what I receive.
Yeah.
It is a lot of the time just making sure I don't over roast it or under roast it.
Yeah. And roasting really has a huge effect on flavor as well. Fermentation, roasting.
Right.
That's our
but this is like
really
a 30 plus minute process.
Totally. Yeah.
We've had weeks and weeks
exactly.
that led up to that 30 to 40 minute process. So
yeah, exactly.
As long as I do that well.
Months and months leading up to that 30-minute process. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's we go through all of that on the tour, and then we have about an hour and a half in the tasting room tasting chocolates from all of these different
with really good history of the industry as well, the bigger chocolate industry and
just culturally too. Ren gives such a robust cultural perspective of cacao, kind of how it's changed throughout thousands of years from domestication all the way to the Industrial Revolution, and so you really get this in-depth walkthrough from the beginning, like where it starts on the farm, all the post-harvest processing, and then a pretty deep cultural history of cacao and chocolate, and then you get to taste 10 different samples of Hawaii grown cacao, all made by Manoa Chocolate. So you have the same processor, and you're really tasting the differences in the origin.
Tour.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah,
I loved it, and we're gonna do it tomorrow.
Well, people that feel like we deal with this a lot, where people are like, we're not gonna we don't have very good palates, we don't taste differences in things, and the way we kind of craft the experience is we kind of do these major contrasts, say between Hilo and Mililani on Oahu. And it's the chocolate from these two origins are so different.
You don't have to be a super taster to tell the difference.
People are like, wow, oh my God, that this doesn't even taste like chocolate. It tastes like you're adding berry. So I think it's really exciting just seeing the takeaway from people that have never really eaten craft chocolate before, let alone single estate Hawaiian craft chocolate.
Yeah, they're changing their chocolate worlds.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll never look at it the same again.
Yeah, and just understanding that there's this, there's real depth in this crop, and there's just so much complexity that is still kind of untapped, and we really get to talk a lot about that. It gets people excited, just about the future of it, especially in Hawaii, what we're trying to do here. So,
we're gonna do this tour tomorrow. I think it's getting a little too dark to keep filming.
Yeah, can you see us anymore? Are we even on camera anymore?
Are you still recording?
How long have we been out here?
This has been another episode of Craft Chocolate TV.
I think we've been out here for a week just talking.
See you next time.
See you next time.